Hola, 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 cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNativeBloodYellow.com, joined once again by Zane Simon, UFC Boston, McGregor versus Siver, 2-round knockout. Is it for real? Is Conor McGregor the next big thing, or what?
I mean, he's the big thing that's already arrived. I don't know about beating Aldo big thing, but I mean, the difference between being a title challenger and champion is like razor thin. And for McGregor to have already made it to the point where he's going to be challenging for a title and where he's probably going to be a top five fighter for the next 3 years is, he's there. He's arrived. He could easily have that Chael Sonnen like career where even if he never wins a belt, he's so charismatic and in his case, unlike Sonnen, fun to watch that the UFC just keeps punting him around in whatever division he wants to go to because he can go up to lightweight too. He's fought
Quite
there
easily.
quite a bit, and so I could easily see him just staying in huge fights for however long he's in the UFC.
Yeah, my only question is, to what extent was Seaver's shot? Was that not the best Seaver we've ever, because Seaver hasn't been necessarily at his peak, in fact, at featherweight, period. But nonetheless, McGregor utterly dismantled the dude, and this is a formidable, serious guy. I can remember Melvin Guillard catching him and blasting him out quickly, but other than that, I can't recall seeing Dennis Siver just deconstructed like this ever.
I think Cub Swanson did a pretty good version of it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's true, that's true.
I mean, yeah, like there's no question that Seaver's shot, and that's not even to dismiss Seaver. He's been fighting since 2004. I mean, he's 12 years into his career. Like that's essentially as long as anyone fights at in at the highest level, let alone at an elite top 10, top 15 level. Seaver's career is already notable for its longevity. So yeah, I don't think there's any question that Seaver's best days are behind him, and that this fight is not terribly meaningful for Conor McGregor. I think there were a lot of people feeling like, oh man, really overlooking Dennis Seaver here. Everybody is. He's a good fighter. He could win this. When the truth is that Dennis Siver is a good fighter, but he was not going to win this fight. Like they're not. It's not overlooking to say that a good fighter is not going to beat a fighter that's much, much, much better than them.
Yeah, and McGregor clearly has it, but I mean, what kind of chances do you give him against Aldo? I still feel like we haven't seen enough of McGregor to have any idea. I mean, Aldo's a pretty unique fighter, especially in this division. I have no idea how that fight's going to go.
I think Aldo wins. I have to give Aldo. I mean, if nothing else, even if I thought that Aldo provided a really good or McGregor provided a really good matchup for Aldo, and I'm not sure that he does. Aldo has put himself beyond doubt at this point. He's moved to the point where I will have to see somebody beat Jose Aldo before I say this guy can beat Jose Aldo. You know?
I have to agree with you there. The only question marks I have would be McGregor is a little bit bigger, and his karate-based style is something we haven't seen Aldo against. Aldo might have faced that. He's got a long, long career going way back before he came into the WEC and the UFC. So at some point in Brazil, he might have come in against a Taekwondo or karate-based fighter, but I doubt it was anybody like McGregor. And so it's just going to be very curious to see how Aldo deals with the stance, the switching from southpaw to orthodox stance that McGregor does, and also the height and reach advantage that McGregor's going to have. And I think McGregor punches a lot harder, but we've never seen McGregor take anything like an Aldo leg kick. So I'm very excited about that fight, and I'm very curious to see if the UFC actually goes ahead with a stadium show in Ireland. That will be a very ambitious promotional undertaking, to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, Aldo right now has to be the happiest man out there. And,
It's easily going to be the biggest payday of his career, and it's a fight he should be very confident he's going to win.
yeah, I think that, he knows he has the tools to beat him. He has the kicking game, he has the powerful Muay Thai and counter striking game and striking game to go through McGregor's style. I mean, it's a fight that lines up well for him. The biggest question really being McGregor's level of athletic dominance. If he can just exert himself athletically over anyone. And and Aldo is the peak, the athletic peak of the mountain as far as UFC goes. So it's for him to be able to do that would be that would be a monumental win, no question.
Absolutely. And Aldo is 28 years old, should be the physical peak of his life. However, he's been fighting since 2004. Like you say, some people, and you're one of them, I think, has the theory that 7 to 9 years is pretty much as far as you can push your body in an MMA career, no matter how young you were when you started. If you go beyond that point, it's over. I don't know that that's proven, but I
Well,
do
and
think
it's
we've seen.
not. I mean, that's a little stark. I mean, it's not that it's over. It's that you start at like once you hit the 7 to the 9 year mark. Really, is I think what's thought of is that you're almost certainly, for most fighters are going to start declining. They're start falling off in one way or another. If they're young and if they're like, been fighting since they're 19, they're only 28, and they're at that 9 year mark, it may be that even while they're at the athletic peak of their career, things just don't quite fire the way they're supposed to. They get hurt a lot when they shouldn't. Like Jamie Varner just randomly, his leg breaking, and Joe Riggs falling and his neck just popping. And these are young guys, or reasonably. That Riggs is 32, Varner's 31.
Yeah,
Um,
but they've been fighting for a long, long time.
yeah,
Of course, in Rick's case, there's been some gun cleaning accidents, but Aldo's had his motorcycle accidents. And the thing that jumps out to me looking at Aldo, and part of this is the really, really high level of competition, but ever since he fought Uriah Faber in 2010 at the one and only WEC pay-per-view at WEC 48, it's been more decisions than KOs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 decisions against 3 KOs and TKOs in that span in the last 4 years. And I felt like he looked, Mendez was very improved in their last fight at UFC 179, but I felt Aldo looked just a touch slower than he did the first time he fought Mendez. And I just wonder if the time and the wear isn't catching up with Aldo just a tiny bit, and that might be enough to make the difference if McGregor is all that he's made out to be.
yeah. For me, that last Aldo win over Mendez, that was what clinched it for me. Whereas, like, I just can't doubt Aldo at all, just because I mean he was dealing with a young fighter who is really at the peak of his career. Like, if there's a
And
time that Chad Mendez is going to beat Jose Aldo, it was right then.
yeah,
Mendez.
especially with the improved striking courtesy of
Yeah.
Coach Bang Ludwig, and Mendez really looked great in that fight, but just couldn't quite put it together to beat Aldo. So very impressive performance from Aldo. But again, Mendez is a very different problem stylistically. Wrestling-based fighter who's added some really good kickboxing. Totally different animal than the karate styles of McGregor. Was sprinkled in with capoeira and all kinds of crazy bullshit. And we just don't know what you're going to see from McGregor. Of course, you read Conor Rubish's piece on McGregor pursuing the puncher's path, which I think was I thought it was an excellent article, but I thought maybe it was a little bit ambitious. He was arguing essentially that McGregor's fallen in love with the power of his fists and is fighting a less subtle game because he doesn't have to fight particularly subtle. That he's becoming less technically sophisticated as he goes along. I didn't feel like I saw that tonight. I felt like we saw some pretty sweet striking tonight from McGregor.
Yeah, McGregor fought. I said it while I was working the Twitter account that McGregor fought about 60% of that fight with his left round kick alone, like just off his left high kick. He was punching some, but it was interspersed with just high kick after high kick after high kick, all at different points, all in different rhythms, all at different times in the fight. I think I see Connor's point, Rubish's point, what he's saying, and a big part of that is especially that McGregor does have a habit of he loves to just leap into the pocket with the idea that he's going to land 2 or 3 shots and has almost zero concern for how he sets them up or whether he gets hit coming in, and that's one of those things that people point to over and over is that he eats shots, and especially in a fight like against somebody like Aldo, how badly that could cost him. But I think he's continued to show enough diversity that he essentially always leaves that avenue open for himself because people are left to guess exactly what he's going to do every time he comes in.
Yeah, the stylistic diversity there, and just the explosiveness and sheer athleticism of McGregor is just we really haven't seen much like it, and especially in featherweight. Um, the last thing I can remember like this is when Aldo exploded onto the scene. I remember that double flying knee TKO of Cub Swanson way back in the day in WEC. That was kind of his coming out party as a real force in the division, and from there, he immediately took the title after that. And so, I don't know. All I can say is I'm really excited for that fight. I hope they go balls to the wall, pull the stadium, book the stadium in Ireland. I hope it doesn't rain. And the poor Irish are going to have to go out there at some ungodly hour of the middle of the night because I'm sure they're going to book it for North American pay-per-view. So it should be very interesting. But let's talk about the rest of the card just a tiny bit, just to say, boy, what a stinky undercard it was for the most part. A couple of highlights. Ghastly cut on Ron Stallings, short notice substitute, who went in against Uriah Hall. But even the Cowboy Cerrone Ben Henderson fight, not that great. Really pretty shocking decision to me. I thought Benson clearly won that fight, but he's won so many decisions I didn't agree with that I feel no pain for the guy losing a decision that he probably should have won.
I had it for Cerrone, so
Really?
I
Based
can't argue.
on
Yeah, I had it 29-28. I thought that judges
which rounds did you give him?
gave him the second and third. Um, judges don't tend to score like short leg kicks, especially like those ones that Henderson
Thigh
was
kicks, the
landing.
stomping thigh
Yeah,
kicks.
those don't tend to show up on the scorecard almost ever. That kind of strike doesn't. And
Well, the whole time I was watching that, Friday night at Legacy Kickboxing, former WEC champ Miguel Torres had his knee demolished by a stomp kick to the knee.
mhm.
Benson never did that. He went to the thigh. I was just wondering if he watched that fight or, I mean, this was a new technique for him. They're friends, so it would be kind of out of character, I think, for Henderson to just stomp Cerrone's knee. But it seems like it was there if he wanted to take it just a shade lower. There
It's
could have
something
been.
I've seen him like I've seen him trying it in other fights, working it maybe two or three around. Um, and I would guess that it's something that he's become more comfortable with and just tried to work into his game more and more. And this is the first fight where we've just seen him do it a lot. And maybe even something that he felt like knowing Cerrone that he knew Cerrone would be especially susceptible to.
I think the problem was that it didn't lead to anything.
Yeah.
Didn't do any visible damage, and I think it impeded him from landing the kicks to the body that have been the bane of Cerrone in their previous bouts.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing it did really was that it kept Cerrone from being able to really establish any rhythm on offense because every time Henderson came in, the first thing Cerrone was looking for was that stomp to the thigh, and then he would have to react to what Henderson was actually doing if it wasn't that. So it kept him from, I think, establishing his own range and his own counters and his own kickboxing as well as he could have. But honestly, I thought Cerrone landed the harder, cleaner shots, especially to the head, throughout the fight. And he just, you know, it, Henderson did that thing where he kind of shrugs off a lot of offense while still getting hit. So he may look like things aren't landing, but he'll still get popped with two or three shots. So I think especially if you start kind of take the leg kicks out of that fight and assume that those aren't going to score, then I have it pretty.
Yeah, and in that case, he didn't have a lot because the leg kicks. I scored it for Henderson because I felt like the leg kicks controlled the fight, controlled the tempo of the fight, set the rhythm, and I felt he won the first round and a half easily. I gave Cerrone the third round, but I gave Henderson the second round by a shade. But let's talk about that fight in terms of the lightweight division. For Henderson, that's two straight losses coming off a few fights ago. Lost his title to Anthony Pettis. He's lost twice to the champ, and now he's got a two-fight losing streak. where does this leave him? I mean, he's got a long way to go to get anywhere near title contention.
Yeah, I mean he does and he doesn't. I think lightweight's one of those divisions where as deep as it is and as tough as it is, there are sort of like three title contender options floating around right now, and then nobody else that the UFC would really consider putting anywhere near a title shot. That like you got Green and Thompson and Kabalov and
Well,
guys.
yeah, I mean, let's talk about the guys that are contenders. So Javier Dos Anjos, who
So
is
you have
fighting for the
Dos
title, could beat
Nurmagomedov.
Nurmagomedov, who's got a
Yep.
title shot as soon as he heals himself, if he doesn't have to fight again before he gets the opportunity. But then you've got Cerrone, who's
Yep.
lost to Pettis and pretty badly in their bout. Gilbert Melendez, who just lost to Pettis. Ben Henderson, who's fallen fast on two straight losses. At that point, I mean, you're talking Edson Barbosa, Josh Thompson, Miles Jury. I mean, guys that are just wildly unqualified for a title
Yeah.
shot at this point.
So
So,
I think if you look at a situation where Cerrone fights himself out of contention, which he could easily do. I mean, he's the kind of guy who's going to be fighting every 2 months or at a minimum. Then there's no reason he couldn't take a random fight in you know in the next couple months to stay busy and lose it and fall out of title contention himself. And Henderson in that time could win a fight. And then, if Dos Anjos loses, then you basically have Nurmagomedov and Henderson could be right back there. It's not quite like middleweight right now where once you are once you've lost, there are suddenly like six guys waiting for their shot, or welterweight, where we're looking at like three potential title contender bouts going on in the next 2 months.
yeah, yeah, it's a very different division. So yeah, I see your point where Bendo could easily fight his way back in. And honestly, I feel as good about his chances as Cerrone. I think your point about Cerrone fighting too often and the fact that he got smoked by Pettis not that long ago. But let's run through the rest of the card really quick. The Fight Pass cards, two fights. Joby Sanchez defeated Tateki Matsuda by decision, split decision. I'm not even going to let you talk about that fight. It was nothing to talk about. Light heavyweight Sean O'Connell beat Matt Van Buren by TKO in the third round. Again, I'm not seeing anything from those guys that I think we're ever going to be hearing anything more about him. Featherweight Charles Rosa versus Sean Soriano on the Fox Sports 1 prelims, however. Rosa got a submission by Darce Choke. I was fairly impressed with Rosa. I think this might be somebody we hear from American Top Team fighter.
Uh, I'm more interested in Joby Sanchez than I am Charles Rosa, but
Really, really well. Then tell me more. Tell me more.
okay.
I'll
I
let you
mean,
talk about the
Sanchez
first
has a
fight.
game that tends to find success in a young prospect coming up. Like he's got a kickboxing style. He's a good athlete. Tends to defend takedowns well. Has developing a well-rounded game. I think Matsuda was kind of a get round, get experience against a tough guy who's going to push you fight, and he passed that test. Rosa, I don't know. I mean, I still don't like the way he fights, and I really feel like Sean Soriano. Like my bigger interest in that is Soriano as a bust, as somebody who just cannot keep the fight where he should, because he was pretty easily winning that fight on the feet, but he
Yeah,
could
it's
not
true.
stop himself from engaging with Rosa on the ground. And Rosa is a good grappler. Like in transition, in chain grappling, Rosa's got a strong game, but his wrestling isn't quite there and his striking is lagging. So it's hard for me to be like, this guy's a killer yet.
It's true. It's true. It's very deceptive to see a guy really dominate with a grappling performance. Then you have to splash cold water all over yourself and remind yourself, look, in today's UFC, unless you're an exceptional wrestler, you're not going to get a chance to fight in the grappling phase very often.
Yeah, I mean, this was a fight that really showed off Soriano's continued shortcomings in his fight IQ. He just cannot stop himself from making terrible decisions and engaging. Even Henry Hooft, afterward, his coach, tweeted out like, one of the hardest things about being a coach is knowing somebody has the talent and seeing them not execute it. So, you know,
Yeah,
e- even his coach, who was sticking by him, what is saying this guy is not executing the way he's supposed to be executing.
very
And
clearly. Very clearly.
that's
Let's move on up the card. Lightweights, Johnny Case knocked out Frankie Perez again in the third round. Made for kind of a slow card. I mean, we had some finishes, but they were coming late in the fights. What do you think about Case and Perez?
That was a great fight for Case. I'm a lot more interested in him now than I was before. I liked his win last time out over Nakamura, I want to say, one of those random Japanese guys who was here for a minute and then gone. Um, he, that was a good win, but that was against a fighter who really I didn't have much hope for. Perez, I thought was a pretty decent prospect coming up, and really known to be a wrestler
It was
grappler with
Kazuki
some.
Takudome, who was a little
Okay,
better than some of the Japanese guys that drift through, but yeah, I agree.
not a lot better.
Not a lot, but a tiny bit. But
A
anyway, go
tiny bit.
ahead.
But anyway, Perez is known to be a pretty good wrestler and grappler and has some okay striking, but that striking was really not apparent in this fight, or its need to develop was really apparent rather. And Case just dominated him everywhere, especially in the wrestling and grappling. I'm always impressed to see a fighter dominate an opponent at what that opponent is best at. So that was a
Yeah,
really impressive win to me from Case.
I agree. Although I think the ceiling is I don't think the sky's the limit for Johnny Case. Although he's young and could get better, but I don't see him. I see him maybe making the top 10. I don't see him being a championship material.
Well, as we've talked about before, he's one of those fighters that even though he's only 25, he's already been fighting for 6 years. So it's he's a guy he's got a very well developed game. His game is basically fully developed right now, and it'll just be about how far that can carry him because time is even as young as he is, time may not be on his side.
Yep. And so let's move on. Flyweight Patrick Holohan beat Shane Howe by decision. Not an impressive performance from Holohan, in my opinion. I felt like Howe was a tackling dummy for him to beat, and he went the distance. Not impressed.
Yeah, it's good to see Holohan or Houlihan get or as Goldberg calls him Hoolahans um
I like Goldberg.
um get rounds just because I think anytime a fighter can win and get rounds for development, that's always good for them. But yeah, he's not a physically imposing fighter, and when he can't get his dynamic style kind of clicking over, turning over, and or his submission game working, he just ends up in these kind of ugly fights. So it's not a pretty win, but it's yeah, it was a
Yeah,
win he was
it's
supposed to get. So it's too bad to see him not really show off.
yeah, exactly. And I felt like Chris Wade lightweight against Zhang Luping, another same, very similar situation. Although he got 30-26 on all three cards, which is not something you often see. Dominant performance, but not the fireworks. I think he had the opportunity to show.
Yeah, that's really a case. This is the second time now that he's shown himself to really have trouble with a big opponent that can really that he can't physically dominate inside. He fought a guy like that, Ozzy Dugalubgov, on the regional circuit. Um, and Li Peng was a pretty good mirror for that, and he won this fight. But Li Peng's also a bit less developed a fighter, so it was once again it's sort of a get rounds fight for a young guy. It's good to see him get the rounds and get the time in there. But yeah, he had an opponent that should have been a chance to show off and really didn't.
No, but welterweight Lorenz Larkin I believe this is his welterweight debut. He's fought at
Yeah.
middleweight for a long time. Finally, we see this is somebody that people have been talking up for a long, long time. All the striking technique in the world. He demolished John Howard in the first round with a TKO. Finally, we see him because like his highlight reel before the fight was pretty pathetic. I mean, it was glancing blows. It was single shots, no combination. I mean, a guy like this should have a highlight reel of vicious knockouts, and finally we've got one.
Yeah, it's this is a good case of a fighter fighting not only in a division that maybe he was not right for him, although I'm not sure that was as much the problem, but also just fighting really good competition at about the same stage in their career as he was, that was better than him, just, more developed, had a better game, had something that was functioning better than what he had. Derek Brunson's a young fighter on the rise. Brad Tavares is a young fighter on the rise. Costa Philippou may not be that young, but his career isn't that old, so he's still, he's about 6 years in. And even Francis Carmont at the time was a fighter very much in his prime. Whereas Howard's more of a fighter who's, been around for a long time, is maybe closer to the tail end of his career, and this was finally a chance for Lorenz Larkin, a good matchup for him against somebody who wasn't really at their peak, and Larkin took full advantage and really showed off. So that's nice to see. And I mean, it's
Absolutely.
nice
I
that
think the size differential makes a big difference because a lot of those guys you reeled off at middleweight could bully him up against the cage and stifle him, like Francis Carmart comes to mind, in a way that Howard just could not do because being a smaller man.
well, yeah, but Howard's been a really functional middleweight for a lot of his career. I mean,
It's
he's
true, but he's smaller than a lot of those guys,
he's
and
short,
just
but he's got no lack of power. I think it's a big part of it's just the sort of like the wear and tear and slowing down a bit. But it's also, I mean, I'm glad that the UFC kept giving Lorenz Larkin chances. He's exactly the right kind of fighter to give those chances to, because he's far enough in his career that like bumping him down to the regional circuit, you're basically just you're pushing him out in his prime. This is
yeah.
Lorenz Larkin hitting the prime of his career, and he's had bad luck in that prime, but he's also capable of this right now, and there's no reason to kick him out into the cold.
No, no, and I'll be very curious to see how he does at welterweight. And I think you could see some good action fights, and I'd
Yeah.
like to see him finally put him against some just brawlers and and
Hmm.
and and cut out the wrestlers. Like we've seen what this guy struggles against wrestlers. Great, we know that. Let's have some fun. Let's see him against some bangers. But up next, welterweight, Cathal Pendred takes a unanimous decision against Sean Spencer. What the fuck?
Oh.
Who scored this and how?
No, I don't know. I had Spencer winning it. Everybody had Spencer winning it. The only thing I can say, and this is no knock against, this is no excuse for the score, because the score is still awful and horrendous, and I'm not going to defend it. But I did think that Sean Spencer had looked worse than I had seen him at any point previously in his UFC career, including his loss to Rafael Natal. So he looked just more wooden. His footwork was more static, and he just kind of ended up trying to brawl. And he had this really kind of awkward. His footwork was just awkward, and he ended up almost tipping himself over and getting way off balance on a lot of strikes. And it just made for a really ugly fight. And I still thought Spencer won it pretty clearly, but it was the kind of performance that even in a win he wouldn't have come out looking any better. Like I wouldn't have seen Sean Spencer winning that and been like, oh, now look at that.
No,
That
this,
really
this
put
that
him
that
over the
fight
top.
was a turd on a platter, no matter what decision.
Yeah,
It was just some vomit on top to
yeah,
really to give it a completely backwards decision. But let's move on to the main card. Gleason Tebow and Norman Park. A split decision win for Gleason Tebow. Quite possibly the contender for Francis Carmart's title of most boring guy in the UFC at this point in time.
yeah. Time, tide, death, taxes, Gleason Tebow by split decision. That's seriously. I I'm always gonna pick guys like Park against him because someday he's gonna lose that fight, but it's never today. It never is. I mean, he has one, two, three, four, five, six, seven split decisions in his career. Eight, no, eight, most
One
of
of those
which
won
he's
against him.
won. Some of
Yeah.
those are losses, but most of which he's won. And he just he always wins the first two rounds and loses the third, and that's just always
As
the way it is.
well, actually two split decision losses in his UFC career. But I mean, he's a gatekeeper's gatekeeper. I thought Norman Park looked pretty good, but he wasn't able to turn it on when he needed to. And Gleason Tebow was just a big, heavy obstacle in the lightweight division. And I don't really think Norman Park's ever going to be a contender anyway. So enough said about that fight. But Uriah Hall demolishes Ron Stallings. Ron Stallings, a very late minute substitute. He looked fairly good against Hall early on before he got blitzed, or actually just stopped by a ghastly cut. But I was glad to see Hall able to pull the trigger against an opponent he should have beaten. And I don't know. I don't really expect. I think we'll see Stallings again since he came in on short notice, but I don't expect to see him make any waves in the middleweight division. Uriah Hall, another chance, another day, and he'll hopefully get the fight with Costa Philippou. And I like his chances in that fight because I don't think Costa Philippou is at his best anymore.
I don't know. I still think Costa Philippou's right there in the thick of it, and he knocked the shit out of Lorenz Larkin not long ago. I would give Costa Philippou a pretty good chance to win that fight, just because
I think
in
he's
the same
tougher than Uriah Hall.
yeah, in the same way that Ron Stallings was doing pretty good until he got hit really hard once. Costa Philippou doing really good against Uriah Hall, you know,
Is a
that
very different
really,
proposition.
yeah, is a very different proposition.
I don't know.
So,
I just feel like ever since Philippou, and maybe I'm just buying into the hype, but ever since he left Ray Longo at Matt Serra, I just don't feel like he's been the same fighter.
I don't know that he has been, but I'm also not sure that Uriah Hall's the right fighter to test whether he has or not. He hasn't
That's
been the
very
same
true.
fighter against wrestlers, um, but I don't know that. I mean, Uriah Hall just that's not really his game. He does it and he does it well when he does it, but it's not
He does it at
quite.
the wrong times when he does it. This is a guy who's got really some amazing kickboxing weapons and a well-rounded game, but I feel like he just mentally can't quite put it all together, and they're struggling, to try to book him in the right fights. He's a guy who won the Ultimate Fighter, or didn't win the Ultimate Fighter. Kelvin Gastelum beat him in the finale, but was expected to win, did very well on the TV show, and then came out and lost his first two real UFC fights by split decision, and just looked very tentative, unable to pull the trigger. And then they gave him Chris Lieben, basically the corpse of Chris Lieben, or the ghost of Chris Lieben, and beat Thiago Santos. Now he's beaten Ron Stallings, so he's got three wins in a row. But again, looking forward to see him tested against Costa Philippou. I'll be very interested to see how that turns out. We already talked about Cerrone versus Henderson. Disagreed about the decision there. You had it for Henderson, for Cerrone. I had it for Henderson. The judges agreed with you and Cerrone. And then, and if you watch the Wikipedia page on Conor McGregor and Dennis Siver, it has changed every single time I've hit refresh. The whole time we've been talking about it, people
Ronald
have been.
McDonald versus Dennis Siver now.
Yes, Ronald McDonald, and it's anyway. It was a quick knockout. It wasn't quite everything McGregor said it would be, since he promised a 2-minute knockout, but he did own that with his joke about he meant to say 2 rounds rather than 2 minutes. Nothing to be ashamed of at finishing Dennis Siver in 2 rounds, especially in a completely one-sided fight. So, any final thoughts on the card?
It was okay. I mean, I think that it provided enough action in the end of it, especially that I'm not upset by the rest of it. Like the T-Bow Park and Spencer Pendred fights really kind of drug the whole thing down.
It did, and the Fox Sports One cards tend to drag things with the
Yeah.
glut of advertising, especially the deeper you get into the show.
Well,
But
I don't know. I didn't hate it.
no, it was okay, and I think a lot of that was a 2-round finale. Had it been a 5-round finale, that gives Fox the chance to run a lot more ads and really kill the buzz. But it was a Conor McGregor card. Conor McGregor delivered, so we're basically happy.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, Conor McGregor delivered. Cerrone Henderson was interesting. Hall, you know, had a reasonably fun fight, and then there was some, Lorenz Larkin performed well. Johnny Case performed well. That's all I really need.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd give a shout out to Charles Rosa for the Darce choke
Yeah.
and the chain submission attempts. But I agree with your points about that's probably got a limited potential to go in the octagon. So that's it for our show. I don't think I'm going to do a bathrobe review on this one, but Eugene will be back tomorrow, probably with Knuckle Up. I'm not sure exactly what his schedule will be, but I think he'll be back tomorrow with Knuckle Up. Tom Grant will not be back with his Inside the Guard show, but then we'll be gearing up for the next UFC Fox card on Saturday night, which features a light heavyweight bout that's got big implications. Gustafsson versus Rumble Johnson. So that'll be fun, and we'll do all the vivisections, all the care don't care previews you've come to expect. So adios, MMA aficionados. Remember, follow us on YouTube at MMANation.com. Follow us on Twitter at KidNate, at TheZaneSimon. Read us on BloodyEvil.com. And adios, MMA aficionados. This is Kid Nate. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Zane.